This is the RotoWire Fantasy Football Podcast, the Week 2 NFL preview. A lot to get to, a lot to unpack from Week 1. What can we apply lesson-wise from Week 1 into this week, or do we have a whole new batch of storylines coming our way? Let's get into it. Welcome on in. This is the RotoWire Fantasy Football Podcast. I'm your host, John McKechnie. That is Mario Puig. I believe he's wearing a Beavis and Butthead shirt. Is that correct for the?
Yeah, it's a Beavis and Butthead shirt.
Yeah.
I've only been wearing it for 3 days now, so it's probably got another 3 or 4 to go.
There we go. You know, just like the weeks of the football season. That's your Week 2 shirt. I'm wearing.
As long as you don't spill on a shirt, like don't spill ketchup or whatever, you can kind of ride it out for a surprisingly long time.
I've got a Ravens shirt on that I believe is from the Beavis and Butthead era. Like it's got the shield with the bee with the wings that
that's
they
96.
They got some sort of copyright imbroglio with some Balmer guy who claimed he made that design. So that's why today we have that angry looking raven bird as the mascot as opposed to the regal bee. But enough history lessons for y'all. Before we get into Week 2 of the NFL slate, and you see anything crazy on the waiver wire this week? What was the most nutso bid that you saw?
Well, I wouldn't describe it as nuts, but I guess the highest figures were for. Well, I do think Justice Hill's figures were a little overboard. The Puka Nacua numbers are pretty big expenditures, but it's hard to argue against it. I wasn't personally putting in those bids, but I could understand why someone might. And if my particular team in question had worse receivers, I could have very much been bidding more, but he would have been a bench player for my team. So I only put like 10% or something. It was literally like it was like what I think like 330 something, 350 something is what he usually went for. So I didn't get a third of the way there. But it's not because I thought it was like a bad idea or anything. It's just the longer Cooper Kupp is out, the more sane the Puka Nacua bids, especially. But I do think there's a bit of a window closing element there if Kupp were to get back in a timely fashion.
Yeah, exactly. So that's really going to dictate it. So we really might not know as far as how well this Week 1 bid-a-palooza is going to go until Kupp gets back. The longer Kupp stays sidelined, though, the more pessimistic that we might not see him for some time. This is totally conjecture, but the concerns that people had about Kupp going into draft season before he even got hurt was he's coming off the injury. He's not a spring chicken anymore by wide receiver standards. We're worried about this offense, blah, blah, blah. But, they obviously were one of the big surprises of Week 1. For me, like similar to you, I have a decent amount of Nacua in best ball, like 12, 13%. So
that's a big number. I bet you're among the leaders for that figure.
I want to pat myself on the back, but it was more just like kind of tea leaf reading on just like how bad the rest of that Rams receiving core sans Kupp.
Hey, it's not easy. It's not easy to make the call that a 5th round, wasn't he like a late 5th round or two, but a 5th round pick, rookie from BYU is going to outproduce 2 second rounders. Neither of them a good idea. 2nd rounder, mind you, but Atwell and Jefferson were both 2nd round picks. So it was not a layup, or at least like if you conventionally use that process, you get a lot of stinkers. So obviously you don't fall for every 5th round hype case. So there's a more you made the shot and not for luck like some others might have.
There we go. Yeah. So feeling okay there. And then I was surprised just again because I have the best ball brain. I kind of figured that I must have stayed away in most of my redrafts, but I ended up having him on a handful of like the industry and deeper formats in home leagues. He was obviously available, and he went for more than I was comfortable with giving because, like you said, my roster construction elsewise wasn't set up to where I needed to spend 30% on something
A
that
backup.
could
Yeah.
backfire. Yeah. Let's press forward. Let's hit this Thursday night game to kick things off. So we've got the Vikings, who fell very flat. That they were the best one score team in the league last year, and one of the best ever, if I'm not mistaken. And that got corrected right off the jump against Tampa Baker. And now they go into Philly, and I mean, we've seen this number actually come down a little bit. It was Eagles 7.5, I want to say, as of Monday, and now we're looking at 6.5 at BetMGM and 6 at PointsBet. So, your thoughts on this matchup, how it's going to shake out, and then from the fantasy angle, what are you looking for from this Eagles backfield? One of the more befuddling things that happened from Week 1.
As far as answering the backfield, I don't know where to start because it's just coming down to kind of like the impulse of Nick Sirianni or whatever offensive coordinator, whoever made the call. It's not based on results. It's not based on anything any of the players have done. It was some other thing, and I can't know what that is. I can't know what any of the other, what Swift or Penny can do to change it. Seems like they wanted to just run the ball with Gainwell because they just think he's the coolest guy among them. I don't know what the results, again, do not have any merit at all. So if they want to keep using a running back with a career average of 4.3 yards per carry, who does not have a 20-yard carry over 135 NFL attempts, I don't even know when is the last time Rashad Penny went like 14 carries without a 20-yard carry? He's got 16 on his last 176. I mean, give me a break. It's just a joke. So what the Eagles did was they made the choice to not have as many yards as they could have. And they almost lost for it. They should have lost for it. In a karmic sense. I'm not trying to take credit away from the defense for the pick 6, but they were really lucky to get out with the win there. And if they had lost, the difference would have been in the fact of their running back personnel usage. So if they're willing to play their odds that way, I don't know why they would be deterred in any other scenario. Like if you're okay almost blowing it like that, then I don't know why you wouldn't be every other week. But with Gainwell hurt, if he's not available, then I don't know what the new standard is. I mean, it seems safe to say Swift is ahead of Penny, but even Swift, I mean, he will not get you the returns as a ball carrier that Penny will. So the Eagles need to find themselves at a point where they decide they need more yards, basically. They right now are choosing that they're I think somewhat arrogantly saying we don't need it. We got other things that we place value above other than results. And against the stupid Vikings, I doubt they pay for it. I mean, the Vikings suck. They looked awful in Week 1. They looked awful last year. The offensive system, I thought might have been, a little clunky in the first year. And I thought, well, maybe in the second year, Cousins there, Hawkinson there through the offseason, maybe they'll figure out the problems in the middle of the field that they had last year. And they didn't. Hawkinson is less of a big play threat than last year. And he was already averaging 6 yards a target last year. And it's not Hawkinson's fault. It's that there's a structural issue or Kirk Cousins has some kind of problem with throwing to the middle of the field. I don't know which it is. Maybe it's both. The other thing is KJ Osborne has to go to the bench. He's terrible.
Oh, he's really bad.
It's such a joke, dude. It's you see this all the time, and you never see coaches pay for it, but you can see coaches do this thing where they're like, oh, trust me, I've seen them in practice. I know this guy isn't ready yet. You make them ready in large part by putting them out on the field. In this case, I'm talking about Addison, like they're saying, oh, well, yes, Addison's way better than Osborne, but he's not ready yet. Like, no, you're just misunderstanding how things work. You put your best players on the field because they're the best players. And even if they're not, quote unquote, ready now, the way you get them ready is by putting them on the field. You need to get your best team, not just for today, but a couple weeks down the line. And even if you're right to say that Addison isn't ready to overtake Osborne, then that's a you problem and you need to address it as soon as possible. Delaying it gets you neither of what you get the dual failure objectives of losing in the meantime to the stupid Buccaneers at home. And then even if you're right, which he isn't, I'm not worried about Addison, but even if he's right to say that Addison's not ready, he's still less ready now than he would have been if you just would have given them the snaps in Week 1. So it's just nonsense. And they paid for it. I'm glad they paid for it. But yeah, that even O'Connell, dense as he must be to make that sort of decision, he's being forced by desperation to abandon what he thought was true. And we're going to see Addison take over. Still, it's not enough. The Eagles got way too much. The Vikings defense is really bad in the secondary. I'm not convinced the run defense is as good as last year either. So if the Eagles don't cover, I don't know how it happened. I guess maybe Hurts turned it over, but I don't really want to bet on that kind of like chance basis of covering. It seems less likely to happen to me than Hurts just having a really easy game, because the Vikings defense is weak. The Patriots defense is really tough.
Exactly. So that's why I actually liked the Patriots to cover last week, and I think the Eagles' offense looks a lot more like what we saw last year. Maybe even their game against the Vikings on Monday Night Football from last year will be a little bit more what things look like. But the backfield situation, I consider myself a bit of a Mario Post historian, and I feel like I remember seeing you when there was all the Gainwell hype during training camp, where you basically spelled out exactly what was going to happen. Where it's like, okay, they can make that choice to have Gainwell run ahead of Penny and Swift. They will be sacrificing yards by doing that, and that's literally what happened. But now with Gainwell being dinged up and not available tonight, we'll kind of get an interesting picture on what the Swift versus Penny split looks like, and if either of those guys are able to perform well enough to where Gainwell kind of retreats to what should rightfully kind of be the third spot in that backfield, in my opinion.
John, Rashad Penny is averaging 5.7 yards per carry over 337 career attempts, and that was behind offensive lines in Seattle that everyone regarded as poor or no better than average. The Eagles are generally a well-run team, but to have no curiosity about what happens when you plug in a Rashad Penny runner behind an offensive line like they have, that's an egregiously misguided choice to make. And I mean, it's bewildering that it's even gone this far, but if they give him so much as like 10 carries, it's going to be difficult to put that back on the bench.
Yeah, that genie will not go back into the bottle. Let's get on to Sunday, but before we do that, we got a message from our friends over at Rival Fantasy. If you're looking for a place to play head-to-head fantasy football games without the huge tournaments, salary caps, or complicated game types, then Rival Fantasy is where you want to play this NFL season. From a twist on a classic game with Fantasy Bingo, where players generate a lineup to complete achievements and get bingo, to head-to-head fantasy challenges where you'll pick which of two players will score more fantasy points, this is the best of fantasy sports. For the 2023 NFL season, Rival Fantasy is offering new users a $200 deposit match plus a $25 first play voucher. They're just giving you money to check them out. $25 at that. Rival Fantasy is so confident you'll love the experience. They're giving you money to play out of the gate. Experience the future of fantasy sports on Rival Fantasy and become a rival today. We also have a message from our friends over at Blue Wire. All right, and we are on to Sunday. Packers, Falcons, a couple of 1-0 teams squaring off at Mercedes-Benz Stadium. We've got the Packers as 1-point favorites on the road. Aaron Jones, obviously a injury casualty from the win in Chicago last week, and on the Atlanta side, there's a lot to unpack from them. I think there's justified consternation about the pass attempts in the passing game. And then for the Bijan Robinson first-round investors, I mean, you got the touchdown, and it looked, phenomenal. But Tyler Algier ain't going away. I actually saw him on a billboard driving around this morning. So they love Algier here.
Also, he has a thing on Roku that BYU has been promoting that you can watch for free. Apparently, a documentary about him. I don't know, but yeah, they timed it right. They coordinated their campaign with the 2 touchdown. I didn't see that coming, by the way. I mean, I thought Algier would play like 10 snaps most weeks, or not 10. Sorry, 10 carries most weeks. 25, I guess maybe 30 snaps most weeks, but I was surprised at how much work they were giving Algier, including in meaningful situations. And also I was surprised at the number of times they were both on the field. Like, I feel like that must have happened like upwards of 10 times, and maybe I'm wrong, but having Bijan Robinson play almost like a flanker role with Algier as like, the hammerhead running back, that kind of makes sense. It's almost like a college idea. It's almost like an Urban Meyer offense.
P. Ryan and Joe Mixon.
I was going to say they were almost using Bijan Robinson like Florida used Percy Harvin, and that kind of makes a lot of sense, actually. And it makes sense too why they would have Robinson maybe play a little leaner of a weight, like 210, 215 versus, he has the frame he could put on 225. That wouldn't be difficult for him. But it's like they kind of made the choice to have him, almost have a more wide receiver like build in exchange for the kind of burst and start stop that he showed, and getting him in space as a pass catcher, all that stuff. So I like the idea, and I think there's a way to especially if defenses keep playing Kyle Pitts the way they have the last 2 years. There's a way to have Bijan Robinson as a pass catching threat play off of specifically the parts of the field that the defenses sell out to sell out against Pitts. And if they do that, maybe getting it to Bijan Robinson's a way to make them pay until they switch. And if they switch to cover Robinson, then Pitts is cut loose and so on. But man, if that were the case, I really wish, or I do wish that the Falcons had shown more of it in week 1. And if they chose for some reason not to show it, then I hope that if they, if there's a reason why they didn't get it done, it's that they chose not to do it, that they chose to basically not show their hand. I can imagine that being a thing that a coach would do. It's just that Arthur Smith at this point kind of has less benefit of the doubt, given that he's kind of struggled to get Pitts and London going, and it seemed just more difficult at times than it's needed to be. And they don't have the results to show. There's no that offense started okay last year and then burned out the longer the season went. And it's like, it'd be one thing if Arthur Smith had in that span kept the Falcons offense competitive, made defenses pay, kept scoring points, kept getting first downs, but he didn't get any of those things either. And it's like, well, it'd be one thing if you're getting nothing from Pitts because all these other guys are getting cut loose and you're winning games, but nobody's doing anything. So 1 week against the Panthers, who are pretty awful, I think it is possible that they held their cards back there. Like they were saving them for later. But it's just difficult to take Arthur Smith's word at that. And it's kind of like, it seems that he's kind of resentful of the suggestion that he could do anything at all better than he has, which is not unexpected for a billionaire's son, but it's not ideal for making a good coach.
No, it is not. And I wonder also if there's a compounding factor here where the defense, again, it was against the Carolina Panthers, looked pretty good. So this could be, Tennessee South in a sense, where it is really, really run heavy and play defense and just try to hope that your quarterback doesn't screw up. And therefore, our fantasy investments in guys like Pitts and in Drake London in particular, one of the more shocking box score results of last weekend, of course. I'm worried that this continues a little bit.
Yeah, Ritter. I'm not comfortable.
He's bad. I'm comfy with it.
Fair enough. Yeah, I was gonna say he's probably awful, but maybe I'm a little too. It's 5 games. Maybe I'm being a little. No, never mind. He sucks.
Stinker.
Yeah, it's 15 of 18. I guess that's kind of good, right? 83%. Do we get points for that?
What was the yardage?
It was
better than Joe Burrow's.
115, yeah. He's better than Burrow, but they're both terrible. Well, I think that London and Pitts are way too good for this to not get going a little bit. And to be fair to Ritter, and even to be fair to Smith, they only attempted 18 passes. So I don't know. We'll see. This game is where Arthur can kind of get me to, drop my complaints. If he shows some muscle against the Packers, then I'll believe okay, you held off the gas in week 1. But until that happens, it's kind of like, man, you got 2 all-pro talents at your pass catchers. Can we please get them 4 catches combined at least? How difficult can this be?
It can't be. And yet he makes it that way. And then on the Packers side, still dinged up. They were dinged up going into last weekend and did not really seem to matter because they just kind of steamrolled the Bears.
I did not see that coming. The first half was a little sketchy for the Packers, but yeah, I left to I can't remember what I was doing at the time, but I left to do something and come back 45 minutes later, and the Packers have run away with the game.
Yep. So that was an interesting result. I think maybe it says a little bit more about the Bears. Maybe it says a little bit about I think so too. And also I feel like the Packers defense might actually be pretty good. They've spent so much through the draft on that side of the ball. It looks like maybe, just maybe, it's starting to pay off a little bit. But on the injury front here, Aaron Jones and Christian Watson did not practice on Wednesday. So if you're on the borderline, do you feel comfortable starting like an A.J. Dillon this week if Aaron Jones is out? Yeah.
If Aaron Jones is out, A.J. Dillon should be like a top 12 running back, even if you don't think he's that good, which I still think he's good, but I have concerns that, when he was so effective at Boston College, that's him in an offense where he's getting upwards of 30 carries every week. And we've seen with Derrick Henry, not just Derrick Henry. I mean, it's a it's kind of a cliche, but it's true, and it's especially true for guys who are kind of power runners who just bring so much mass, like AJ Dillon and Derrick Henry. They're not going to be as good on carries 1 through 10 as they would be 15 through 20, and to more degree than for smaller running backs. Like, it might be true for all running backs, but it's more true for guys like Dillon. And with Aaron Jones there, I don't know how you fix that exactly, because Aaron Jones is way too good to take off the field. You're not going to put Aaron Jones on the bench to make AJ Dillon better. That doesn't make any sense either. However, if Aaron Jones is out, I think as long as the Packers don't get themselves out of the game by starting so slowly that they fall behind, they're going to need Dillon to take carries, and I think he'll get better basically over the course of the game. So if Aaron Jones needs to sit out, and by the way, even as someone who has a decent amount of Aaron Jones, I'm definitely a big Aaron Jones fan. If I was the Packers and Aaron Jones is at all, less than, 95%, just let him sit out. Why did you even pick Dillon in the second round if not to kind of like use him when in his most advantageous spots? And like, this would be one, and it has the dual purpose of letting Jones be healthy for a game that might matter more in the future. Like, not to completely write off the Falcons, but if you can't beat them without Aaron Jones, you're kind of toast anyway.
Yeah, no, well said. So yeah, keep an eye on that injury situation going into the weekend, but AJ Dillon certainly elevates up the rankings should Aaron Jones miss this one. Last item on this one, how do you see the Packers passing game unfolding this week?
Well, I got to say, I am a fan of Romeo Doubs, but I was surprised at the way that game went last week. And I, specifically as it relates to Jordan Love, remain a little concerned. Like, I'm not so sure that, not that Love did a bad job or anything, but it might have been more that the Bears were a mess than it was that the Packers, dictated a whole lot there. If Christian Watson is out again, that makes things a little more harrowing yet, just because, like, if Christian Watson was out there, even if he's not getting catches, he's pulling the safeties further downfield. They're rolling some coverage toward him over the top, freeing up pretty much everybody else. It's good to see that Jaden Reed wasn't too destroyed from that. He had one hit that looked kind of concerning, but I guess he's okay. He could get going here a little bit. I guess if you're talking about matchups with the Atlanta secondary, it's whoever's away from AJ Terrell that you like to get a target, assuming Jesse Bates isn't, spying on them. Because Jeff Okudah, Trey Flowers, D. Alford, Mike Hughes, like, these guys, I don't think can really cover players especially not Dobbs, but not Reed either. Reed, I only put in a lower regard because he's a rookie. I think he's totally good starting prospect in the long term. Could be a Musgrave game. I don't know what to think of. I don't know how the matchup works with Bates versus the tight ends, but if Musgrave can kind of, not to say Musgrave can't beat Bates when you're 6'6", 250, you can kind of make a catch even if you're covered. But 3 catches for 50 yards on 4 targets. Given the modest ambitions of the Packers passing game in that one, I think only throwing it 27 times with Love, there's a way for Musgrave to have some big games this year. I can't really see why this one shouldn't be a candidate.
I think Musgrave seems to be, trending towards being one of the more productive rookie tight ends this year, and someone that could be, legitimately startable in most formats. We do have a start-sit question quick before we get on to our next game. Jalen Waddle or Michael Pittman?
Of the 3, I think.
Yes, or Javonte Williams.
I am very much loath to ever bench Waddle. I'll take another look at this just to make sure I'm not. Let's see, not Pittman, not yeah. I'd stick with Waddle.
Yeah, I would as well. Javante's a little bit tempting because he's a running back, but I feel like Waddle, the big play ability there, I think kind of puts him over the top. And
the Patriots are probably going to roll some help toward Hill. I know that there's that interesting figure about Tyreek Hill struggling against Jonathan Jones, but that's not to say the Patriots are going to say, yeah, one-on-one, Jonathan Jones. You go handle Tyreek Hill by yourself. That's not how it happens.
Yeah, I don't think so either. I think Waddle gets more involved. I mean, I think Miami was pragmatic to just continue to go to Tyreek Hill as long as the Chargers couldn't stop him. And you know what? They couldn't stop him.
Yeah.
Let's go Raiders Bills. Bills really made a mess of things, to say the least, Monday night. And the Raiders went into Denver, got the win over the Broncos in ugly fashion. But, that might be their style this year. So oddly enough, we're in week 2, and it feels like the Bills are at a crossroads.
Yeah, I don't know what – this is one of those things that it seems like will be – a big part of the story of the Bills season, but maybe one of those things that we consider a rear view narrative, surprisingly soon, but certainly in like a month or 6 weeks, this could be more like a blip that we don't recall, despite a lot of panic. Week 1 panic often turns out to be kind of misguided. I don't know how easy it is to brush away the concerns here, though, especially because the team has super high ambitions. It'd be one thing if they were a plucky, recently,
like the Bears.
The Bears, they can, kind of afford to suck because they were probably going to anyway, and they were a long shot and all that. But the Bills have been, in my opinion, overhyped Super Bowl candidate for going on 3 years now, and the heat's there now. It's not so easy for Sean McDermott. Can't tell them like, oh, well, we'll be better next year. Like you've had the chance 2 times now, and you're not getting any better, and you might have gotten worse. I think they probably have gotten worse, or at least defenses have adjusted a little bit to that offense, and I don't think the Bills have responded at all, let alone, in an effective way. Like they seem to just be kind of, I don't know, vibing their way through it at best. And even worse, a possibility is like just pressing the same buttons that worked before. You got to be able to. Oh, sorry.
I totally thought that they were doing that. Like it seems like every off season that the Bills are in the Bills media are just like, okay, things are going to be different this year. We're not going to have Josh Allen just run around and make plays. It's going to be more structured. We're also going to take some of the rushing work, but maybe it is a Josh Allen problem at a certain point where he can't play within any, modicum.
He needs accommodation. A lot of most quarterbacks, even great quarterbacks, need some amount of accommodation. Like look at Jalen Hurts. He needs a lot of accommodation. I think he's a really good player. It makes sense for the Eagles to pay him whatever he needs to get paid, etc. But he's not playing that way on, 31 other teams. So with Allen, the deal, as far as I can tell, is that yes, he requires accommodation to such extent that it basically throws away the chance for getting running backs involved with the passing game. It largely throws away the infrastructure to get a running game going at all in the first place. And the reason I say those 2 things is that I think the accommodation Allen needs is he needs space. He needs to be able to leverage his throwing strength over the entire field. And when the field has to be covered in its entirety, openings underneath occur more easily. His problem is that he'll never be Tom Brady, whoever is he won't even be like Brock Purdy as far as processing goes. He needs to have the processing made a little easier, not by like a simpler offense, but in my opinion, you get him more space. It buys him more processing time. He can use the space on the field to spread the defense thinner and give himself just like wider margins to interpret the defense. But what they did instead was they cluttered the offense more by spending a 1st-round pick on Dalton Kincaid. And even the speed that they put on the field with Deontay Hardy, they were only using as like a screen. They were using him exactly like Isaiah McKenzie. And that's so insane. I you can tell just the way I'm reacting now. Like that made me really angry during that game because it's like, if you just needed Isaiah McKenzie, you could have just not cut him. Like, why do you want more of that nonsense? Use Deontay Hardy like the Saints did. The Saints knew how to use him better than you. And you can't figure, I guess Peyton was there at the time. It wasn't like a Carmichael show at the moment, but at the time. But Deontay Hardy is a killer downfield threat, and they didn't send him there. They just put him on the field for like screen type stuff and go like, oh, why didn't that work? Because you are not even using Josh Allen's greatest strength, which is his arm. Why would you want to do like a West Coast offense, double tight end, West Coast offense with Josh Allen? Go 4 wide. Get fast receiver, run 4 verts every single play. That's a better offense than what they called. So I don't know if it's, I mean, to me, it seems like Ken Dorsey is no Dable. And it seems to me that Brandon Beane has pretty severe limitations as a GM. I think he's basically a fraud. He made the Josh Allen pick. He's been coasting on it ever since. Everything else he does is a bad idea. He still doesn't have an offensive line there. The Kincaid pick was just not a good idea, at least not if they're paying Knox what they are. They use Gabe Davis in the wrong capacities. They signed Deontay Hardy to use him like Isaiah McKenzie. Before they wasted a second-round pick on James Cook, they wanted to sign J.D. McKissick for what? To get you like 3.5 yards per target? What did you think was going to happen, Bean? And no one's really pressing him with questions like those because, like, hey, he's a sharp analytical guy. He drafted Josh Allen, and he knew that running backs don't matter. It's like, well, where did he get? What's he got to show for any of it?
With the Bean comment, it reminds me of this Futurama episode where there's like a board of like Professor Farnsworth and Warnstrom hit his foil, and it's like, oh, he proved that 50 years ago, and he's still coasting on it. That's what the Josh Allen comment reminded me of. But yeah, I don't think that they've necessarily built a great roster to kind of, go from a team that is perennially missing the playoffs to someone who's making the second round of the playoffs, routinely, but getting from that point to the next, and then getting over the hump, which is, what the media, it feels like, has been rooting for like aggressively for years now. And it felt funny on Monday to see the reaction, even from local Bills media. Like Ryan Talbot was like, the Bills are a laughingstock. Josh Allen never learns. This is bad. And I was like, I don't want to totally say that I want to bathe in it, but I mean,
yeah. And he's a pretty like, I think he would say now that he kind of overreacted to the despair of it all. But yeah, he's normally like a pretty, what would you call it? Like even keeled. Is that the word? Like he's not a reporter, commentator prone to hysteria, but that's exactly, what we were talking about before. Is like with the ambitions being what they are, and the time that has passed since those expectations were planted, there's this feeling like, there's the boat's taking on water and we got to do something, but we don't know what to do, and you can just kind of feel the walls closing in on you, and it's stressful, and I'm sure it's stressful to the Bills. But what I will say is I think they get it, not figured out in the sense of like not letting last week's game happen again. But they're figured out in the sense that they'll become more like their baseline over the past few years. Like this has been the same show for the past few. Allen has had games like this quite a few times. They just kind of brushed it off in the past, or he'd, run for 80 yards and 2 touchdowns and they'd win anyway, and they wouldn't criticize him over it. Stuff like that. But yeah, it's when they're going against a tough defense, and when you if you go too high and you make clutter in the middle of the field, and you make Allen sit and sift through the clutter, he tends to just kind of freak out a lot of the time and just start chucking the ball, starts running around, starts doing Wyoming Josh Allen stuff.
Yeah, right. Exactly. Like you could tell, especially like when the offense wasn't really moving the ball, he just felt like he needed to revert to the hero ball and force things. And, the Jets were uniquely well set up. They
were putting that on him too. Yeah,
totally. But I also feel like as it pertains to this game, that the Jets were uniquely well set up to, totally make him pay for it. Whereas the Raiders in this case, I think the Bills win this game, but I think the Bills do have long-term problems for this season. It's just, it probably won't bite them this week.
Definitely not this week. Yeah. And also they tend to do this in past years too. they're probably going to really bludgeon the Raiders in this one. They're probably going to do the thing where it's like, Josh Allen gets back in everyone's good graces because he throws for 320 and 3 touchdowns and runs for a fourth. And people will be like, okay, they're back. Yeah, only in the way that they've been there the whole time. They do win games like this. They do just clobber defenses like the Raiders. The problem, like you said, is when you get a defense that can punch back a little.
Yep. So it won't matter too much this week. I think the Bills should carry it, and that's obviously implied in the spread being what it is, where it's 8.5 to 9.5, depending on where you're looking. Let's get on over to Cincinnati. We got an AFC North clash. We've got the Ravens going up against the Bengals. Kind of a lot to unpack here. We've got the Bengals checking in as 3 or 3.5 point favorites. I guess we'll start on the Cincinnati side. What the heck happened last week?
John, wouldn't you suspect that Burrow must not be healthy? Like that's even if they're kind of telling the defense the play calls ahead of time, I feel like they would do better than 82 yards on it's literally the worst quarterback box score I've ever seen. It's
Joe Burrow. Like, that's crazy.
Higgins not even getting like a target. Didn't get a catch anyway. So that game from Burrow and the Bengals offense, John, I'm afraid there's no other comparison. It's the what is his name? The Sikowski era Rutgers team. Like, that's the passing game that they had with Jamar Chase.
Sikowski. Wow.
Yeah, with Jamar Chase and T. Higgins, they had a Sikowski era Rutgers passing game. And the Browns defense is definitely, improved. They had a pretty weak defensive coordinator before, and I don't know if Jim Schwartz is properly good. It seems like he's more like average or tiny bit above average and imbalanced kind of at best. Like, Schwartz has his kind of like pass rushing strength, but it's I think in the past he's kind of been undone in run defense. And Mixon, I guess, did have a good game there, but yeah, it's going from Joe Woods to Jim Schwartz. That might have been a little bit of a shock for the Bengals, and I don't know what kind of game planning they did. If they were looking at last year's tape for that game, that was a mistake, because they should have been looking at whatever Jim Schwartz tape from wherever he's been, and it's a lot different than what Joe Woods was doing. So the Browns defense is a lot better. It's not as concerning as if Burrow had that game against a Joe Woods defense, but it's just tough to get past worst game ever. It's hard to just shrug that one off, but it can be more easily shrugged off, I think, if you say, well, Burrow was physically limited, rusty from the lack of practice repetitions, and if so, maybe not this week specifically, but it'll get better with time. And
I mean, they started slow.
I certainly
last
hope
year.
so. What's that?
Right. They started slow last year. I mean, they had a catastrophic week one as well against the Steelers, where Burrow had at least one pick six and some fumbles, a lot of sacks.
That was bad, and this was somehow lower yet, like safely so. So I do chalk up the difference to the calf, or at least I kind of feel like I have to, because I have no other idea what could possibly be going on.
Okay, so do you think that the 6 days of rest or whatever is going to have Burrow looking better in this instance? And then on the Ravens side of things, they still don't have Marlon Humphrey.
Yeah, and they lost Marcus Williams and
classic.
Yeah. Why? How could that
never hurt before he got to Baltimore, and now he's only hurt.
How does the strength and conditioning coach just make your pectoral muscle tear? How does that in a game? I don't understand. It seems to be like it's the results have been clear enough for this strength and conditioning coach.
They've changed him a couple times. Like in the last, I think they're on their third one. Like, they are trying.
Maybe it's Harbaugh's practices. I don't know what it is. I can't figure it out.
They're known for their conditioning test being the most grueling in the NFL. So
they're
like maybe they practice too hard.
Maybe Harbaugh's like NFL Saban, where it's just like his players all have like degenerative shoulder conditions after 2 years because they're hitting so much in practice. I don't know. But yeah, the Ravens are beat up. The Bengals maybe are substantially beat up, especially with this Burrow question, but I don't know that they're more beat up than the Ravens. Like, they aren't. And if Stanley is not available or is limited, it's like we all saw the Ravens offense struggle with the Texans defense. I think that's more excusable than, the spread going in, the general expectations going in. would lead someone to believe like Will Anderson and John Green are really good. But if Stanley's not himself, and I guess he hasn't been in like 4 years now, the Bengals pass rush can present some real problems. I mean, Hendrickson, of course, is like a 14 sack player. Hubbard, more like an 8 sack player, but still, totally decent. And a lot of that's just the product of playing on the strong side most of the time. So Hubbard, Hendrickson, the Lou Anarumo, there's a lot of danger here for the Ravens, despite me. I still have, full faith in Lamar, Monken, all of that. I think, week one, they probably did not use the most ambitious playbook, both because it was their first game and because it was the Texans. And having a game like this in week two will also make you keep, your cards a little closer to the chest. So I think they have more to show, but even if so, it would be difficult to prove it if Stanley is, less than 85% or something. It's like, this is just this is like a real buzzsaw, whereas week one was kind of just a, awkward situation.
Yeah, the buzzsaw still had like the plastic covering on it. So with the Ravens in the injury front, I'm not expecting Stanley to play, and Linderbaum is also
Linderbaum
banged up. So that's two very, the center and the left tackle. It could get dicey. So that's what kind of, I think that compounded with the Bengals being as bad as they were in week one, I think this is a bounce back spot for the Bengals. I think, they get it done here, especially again with no Marlon Humphrey. I think that Ravens secondary until Humphrey gets back is going to be very vulnerable.
Also, John, like the Ravens don't really have it in them, it seems like, to kind of have like a safe adjustment to that. It seems like in the past when they had these terrible corners playing when various guys were out, they sort of still called the same defense. And yeah, against Chase especially, it's like you got to be able to just spam him at the expense of everything else. And I don't know if they have it in them. I don't know if they can call a defense that way.
Yeah, McDonald seems to have some strange ideas that like look cool in like still shots. Like they had like Ojabo lined up over the center at one point, and like what's his name, the guy from Texas A&M. I'm blanking on his name, but yeah, Justin Matabike, like playing outside the tight end. It's like, okay, like that's a weird look, but like did it work? What are you? How in your bag
He's so
are you?
crazy.
Yeah, wow. So that's just like dog whistle for like film guys, I guess. But beyond that, I think that the big fantasy question here, Mario, as we finish out this game, go to the next one. What are your expectations on this Baltimore backfield moving forward, with Dobbins obviously being out for the season? Does Gus Edwards scale up, and how much does Justice Hill scale up? Like what would you have bid on him in Fab this week?
Not much. I'm kind of low on Justice Hill, though, to the point that I'm not confident he'll hold off Melvin Gordon. And it's probably the case that Gus Edwards is a worse fit for this offense than he was the Greg Roman one, but that doesn't mean that they don't need Gus Edwards now. They do, because he's their only good runner, as far as I see anyway. And Hill is probably a better runner than Gordon, but maybe not. Like Hill, even when he hasn't been hurt, has had pretty mediocre results his whole career, to the point that not only about Gordon am I concerned, I think when Keaton Mitchell is healthy, it's going to be really tough to keep him off the field. I know he's tiny. I know he probably can't pass block. I don't care, especially when you're struggling as an offense. You see that firecracker on the bench, you're going to pick it up. Like you're going to say like, we got to try something. Just put Mitchell out there. He's so fast. Maybe something good will happen. And it probably will, because he is really fast and he's a good runner. He's faster than Hill by quite a bit. Even if Hill is somewhat fast, Mitchell's like a blur. And man, if you're not moving the ball, you got to try something. And you got someone like him laying around, you got to give it a shot. So Hill doesn't scale up for volume either. I didn't understand people spending a third of their fab on him, because like,
no.
What do you think is going to happen? He's going to get 20 carries? No. He barely even did that at Oklahoma State, and like he's sure as hell not getting used like he was at Oklahoma State in the NFL.
So Justice Hill is fine. Like I don't think that the overall picture for this run game is overly bleak. But I think that for fantasy purposes, Gus Edwards to me is still the guy. And I think to your point on Keaton Mitchell, when I was doing my fab on NFFC. So a deeper league, a league where, maybe you feel more attuned to spec on stuff and you have bigger benches. I went ahead and I stashed Keaton Mitchell because I think, and if I firmly endorse it, like that is my fantasy take of the week. Probably is if you have bench spots and have the stomach to hold off till week 5 before someone is active. I think Keaton Mitchell could like really unlock things and be someone that's a big fantasy difference maker down the stretch.
John, I can imagine that people have found me annoying about, a lot of reasons, of course, but the main thing being like a lot of these running back calls, I never shut up afterward. And my God, John, even you don't want to see what the brand will do if Keaton Mitchell becomes a thing.
Oh boy.
It's going to be a problem.
As someone who is a big fan of his as well, I'm going to be echoing your sentiments and smashing that RT button for sure. Let's go on over to Seahawks Lions, but before that, we've got a couple of messages here. First from our friends over at Better Vision. I think we can all agree that fantasy sports are awesome. So is daily fantasy sports and sports betting. No lies detected. That's why we have so many friggin' accounts. Ain't that true? What's not awesome is going to a bunch of different apps to find the best odds and manage all your fantasy lineups. Enter Better Vision. That's BETTOR Vision. Better Vision is the only app that syncs all your fantasy DFS and sportsbook accounts in one place. We only show you the best odds for every bet, so you always get the best value. And our dashboard is the only one-stop shop to track all your fantasy matchups, DFS picks, and bets. Visit bettervision.us to download Better Vision today. I feel like I need to do that because I'm playing on like 6 or 7 different platforms, and it is a lot to keep track of. Vivid Seats, another friend of ours. Football is back. Kick off the NFL season with Vivid Seats and score tickets to all the hottest matchups and biggest games of the year. Catch every pass, every tackle, every heart-pounding play of your favorite team live and in person. And with Vivid Seats rewards, now you earn rewards with every single purchase. Each ticket you buy gets you closer to your reward. Just buy 10 tickets, then simply cash in your credit towards your 11th ticket purchase. It's that easy. Plus, Vivid Seats is offering you $20 off your first $200 ticket purchase with code RotoWire. That's ROTOWIRE. From the 50-yard line to the upper deck, Vivid Seats has great tickets for all the 2023 games that matter to you. Just visit vividseats.com or download the app today. All right, Lions, Seahawks. We got the Lions checking in as 5.5-point favorites. It's 4.5 only at BetMGM, actually, interestingly enough. Seahawks obviously laid the big egg last week. I mean, you lose to the Rams. You've got some hope. I guess the Seahawks, I pull for them. I'm a Seattle well-wisher just generally. And I thought that they were such a fun story last year. But is this a bit of a plexiglass effect potentially where the Seahawks were so far above expectation last year that it kind of comes crashing down a little bit this year?
Well, I guess it's possible. I think the issue from week 1 was mostly that McVay totally got the better of Carroll. I mean, the Seahawks couldn't do anything. Their defense was a total mess. Their offense, of course, was a mess. Nothing went right for them in that game to the point that it almost reminded me of that 49ers game in the playoffs where it's just like, why did you even show up today? What were you doing all week? I love Pete, but man, that's one of those games where it's like, and he's had too many of them lately, despite probably still being no worse than an average coach overall. He's had too many of these games where it's like, are you sure you haven't just lost it at this point? Because old Pete Carroll does not let games like this happen. And even if you got some punches left, you don't have enough. It seems like not often enough anyway. Games like that can't happen. Even though McVay is a great schemer, you can't get pants like that by a divisional opponent. And I don't care who was hurt. Like Devin Witherspoon was a bad pick. That's not a good excuse. So with that said, I guess if Witherspoon and whatever the other Jamal Adams, if any of them get back, I don't know what the status is with either of them, the Seahawks would have fewer excuses by their own reasoning. It's just I wouldn't really raise expectations over it. So with that said, I do think the offense will bounce back at some point. It's just harder to believe it will be this week, which I previously was, kind of expecting. It's harder to keep that expectation with both of the starting tackles out, and particularly Cross. I don't know what they're going to do about that exactly, but even though I think the Lions defense is not particularly good, they of course have a couple guys who can rush the passer, and Aiden Hutchinson versus backup tackles, whoever they are. That's Stone Forsyth. Not good. So
that is the most Georgia name you could have. I think Stone Mountain might even be in Forsyth County. Like,
thinking it might be like, oh, okay. But yeah, it's a cool name, I guess, but not good for the projection of the Seahawks offense. And it's still one of those things, though. I'm like, man, those receivers, those receivers are going to get a certain level of per snap production over a bigger sample. And it should be against corners like these that a correction occurs. Like these numbers from the receivers in week one, they won't hold. So are they going to hold for 2 weeks against a defense like the Lions of all teams? It seems a little sketchy to me, but what could happen is those receivers have good games. Geno Smith gets over 300 yards and still the Lions beat them because Geno, has like 3 turnovers or something like that. While the Lions offense just runs all over the Seahawks because they can't do anything on defense, and the run is one other. Kyron Williams is not a good running back. I'm sorry, not a good NFL running back, not a good starting running back. And if you can't stop Kyron Williams, Montgomery, and if the Lions have any curiosity about using their 11th overall pick, Gibbs, those should be problems for the Seahawks defense, assuming they don't completely reverse type from week one.
So this feels like a game where should have some DFS interest. I think Amon-Ra St. Brown is a lock in this spot. I'm super impressed by him last Thursday night. Would you maybe even throw a little Josh Reynolds in there? I thought he looked good last week, personally.
Well, I think Reynolds is just he's like one of those 45 grade players who, he'll have good games. Any given year, he'll have a handful of good games. But the problem is, I think when you start depending on a player like that for production, it tends to go badly pretty quickly. Not that he only makes plays when the defense fails to cover him or something like that. Like Reynolds can play receiver pretty well. It's just, I think if he's the kind of guy who will be good for you when you allow him to kind of show up whenever he does, versus if you try to get him part of your central game plan. I don't know if it works out that way. I think Reynolds is clearly better than a number of receivers who play 3-snap roles around the league. Like KJ Osborne is clearly a much worse player than Josh Reynolds. So if it's between those two, I don't know how you stick with Osborne at this point. And I know it's a less enviable position that Reynolds plays with the Lions, but he's a better player and he's playing just as many snaps. So I think there's something there with Reynolds. I just, I honestly, I guess the Seahawks defense might be so busted, it just doesn't even matter what goes on.
That's kind of what I'm thinking. I do like Seattle to cover this one, but I think that it's going to be I'm hoping this too. I hope this game is as fun as last year's game, because that was like one of the best games of the regular season.
Yeah, and these Lions corners still aren't very good. And to be fair to them, Mosley is not healthy yet. He's a good outside corner when he's healthy. So I don't know. I think the Seahawks receivers kind of flex a little here, and maybe the Seahawks still lose and the Lions still cover, but I don't really, I'm not quite with this downward action on the over under, at least now down to 47.5, down 3.5 points. I think I'd be interested in the 48 and above.
Yeah, I think I would as well. I think both these defenses might be in a bit of trouble in the dome. Last item here for my own personal edification. How worried should I be about Zach Charbonnet? I'm very leveraged.
I think the issue last week was more just that the Seahawks got completely destroyed, and
yeah.
I think it's one thing to have a game plan of some sort for some reason, and it's another to still believe it after you get your face ripped off like they did. So I don't know. Granted, it was stupid to pick him in the second round if they're going to do what they did last week. Like, that's just whatever Carroll or anybody else wants to say. Like, it's not justifiable. And if he's not ready to play in that game, that's just another failure on the coach's part. If you're going to spend a second round pick on Charbonnet, get him on the field. Simple as that. And if you can't get him on the field, just walk away from the job. I don't know what else to say about it, but the Seahawks were not validated for their game plan approach last week, and maybe they will find some reason to change their priorities after getting completely embarrassed like that.
And, maybe with the tackle injury issues, I mean, they signed Jason Peters. Maybe they just have to run the ball a little bit more and then Charbonnet, but that would also hurt our 48 and over expectations, but not if Zach Charbonnet just runs for 3 long touchdowns. So
yeah, the Lions don't have much of a run defense. They don't have one, I would say. So yeah, the Lions defense still sucks. I think that the over, especially at its new point, is much more likely than the under.
All right, let's ride with that. Let's get on over briefly. AFC South clash in Houston. Got Indianapolis traveling down to face the Texans. Indianapolis, 1 point favorites on the road.
I don't know if I agree with that on the road.
No, I don't think they did anything last week to make me say like, oh yeah, they need to be favored in this spot.
They have a bad
I like the Texans
team
to cover. They do.
Yeah,
these teams are both very bad. I think Richardson. I was a little bit surprised by how ready he looked, especially with the kind of shorthanded conditions. Like we kind of figured that A, it might take some time, and then B, with Jonathan Taylor's absence, like it's going to be tougher on Richardson. But I thought he purported himself very well last week against the Jaguars.
He started fast. He started like red hot, and what happened was the defense adjusted, and guess what? Colts didn't have enough good players to counter adjust. You got a threat that's working for you. The defense responds to it. You're gonna have to move something else to the weak spot the defense just showed. And when you only have top 5 thinnest receiver depth chart in the league in a bad running game, that's not enough. Richardson did his part, and then they had nothing left.
Yeah, exactly. So I mean, they
got what they deserved, and they suck. But it sucks for Richardson and even Steichen. I mean, Steichen I think had a really good game plan. He had nowhere near the amount of ammo that the Jags did, so it shouldn't have even been as close of a game as it was, in my opinion. But going against this Texans team, going on the road there, DeMeco Ryans is no chump, and he will not have a team play like weaklings no matter what happens. He showed that against the Ravens. They don't play scared. They don't play weak. And the Colts, I think, will eventually learn to do just that as it kind of not that Steichen isn't doing his part, but it's just how many times do you think a team can watch itself lose because their best player on offense has been banned from the team because of their idiot inheritance case degenerate owner? Like that's going to distract from your focus a little bit. It's going to make you feel less invested from a pride angle a little bit. Whereas the Texans are all blood and vinegar. Like they're out to kill you. And if you're not thinking the same way, you're just not going to have as much juice as them.
Yeah. I mean, the Texans, they were in a tough spot last week, and the offensive line issues I thought, showed up a little bit. But I think generally, like you said, we're talking about 2 bad teams. I think that there's a little bit more edge to Houston, most likely. Probably a little bit less talent overall, but I got to side with the Texans here. And as far as like the fantasy angles from this game, I wasn't a big Pittman guy in draft season, but you got to be encouraged by how he played. And on the Texans side, I mean, he's injured right now. I just am huge buyer's remorse on John Mechie, but I think Nico Collins should be able to get going a little bit here in his own part. Who in your mind, is there anyone as far as that wide receiver 2 role on Houston that might be, worth a look?
Well, Woods was used quite a bit in week 1. I think him and Collins are going to remain your 2 wide receivers. And I don't know what anyone ever thought Noah Brown was supposed to do. So as far as why they would use him or when, I simply have nothing. It just doesn't make any sense to me. So even as someone who thought that Nathaniel Dell was kind of overrated as a prospect and is still overrated, clearly they should put Dell on the field and never put Brown on the field over him. And again, I'm not high on Dell. It's just Brown. There's no reason for a guy like him to be on the field. It doesn't make any sense. He's like a tight end receiver tweener who is neither as good of a blocker as a tight end and is not as good of a route runner as a receiver. I hate that kind of logic in a personnel wrinkle. Like it doesn't actually make sense.
The Holy Roman Empire, neither Holy Roman nor an empire. Discuss.
Yeah, so that's what we're looking at, and again, they got to go with Dell. The more the season goes along, I think, because they're not going to get anything from Schultz. What they should do is bench Schultz for Quentin Tarantino and put Dell at slot receiver if Mechie's unavailable, and that's clearly their best loadout. So Collins, Woods, I mean, he's going to be underneath. Him and Dell get the easy ones, but yeah, if they can't get Collins here going, that'd be a little discouraging, especially because the Colts corners are just weak as hell.
Yes, they are. Before we get on over to our next game, our guy Tyler Sperry has patiently been waiting, asking some questions in the chat. So your thoughts for Thursday night, Justin Jefferson versus Darius Slay?
No concern for Jefferson in any starting format. If you're talking about showdown slate, the only real reason to be away from Jefferson is the price. There's not reason to worry about him having a bad game any given week. If he must go one-on-one with Slay, I think Jefferson wins that. But the Eagles do a surprisingly little amount of shadow matching up, and they oftentimes, even when they do more like man match zone things than they do straight up press man coverage. So Slay might be kind of on Jefferson, but not the way that, Jalen Ramsey or Darrelle Revis were on a receiver. It's not quite that deal. So I would not have any anxiety about Jefferson relative to Slay.
I wouldn't either. So yeah, obviously you're firing him up, but I think you rightly alluded to, the DFS action for the showdown slate being,
I try to get him in. The Vikings suck and they can't do anything else. Osborne's not getting the ball. Hawkinson, unless the Eagles stop tackling, is not getting 20 yards downfield.
Nope. So yeah, I'm with you there. Let's keep rocking here. We've got a bunch of games still to go, so we'll pick it up here. Yeah. We're good. We're good. Chiefs Jaguars. Probably game of the weekend, in my opinion. So we don't need to speed through this one.
Easy chalk.
Yeah.
Oh, I mean, you'll want this, I think, for DFS purposes, because the Chiefs are gonna, it's almost like a half up a bye week that they had, and Andy Reid on bye weeks. He's taken apart better defenses than this one. So Mahomes is gonna come roaring back. The question is, like, how much do the Jaguars punch back? And I think they'll punch back quite a bit. I'd still take the Chiefs to win this, but this should be chalky for DFS purposes, I would imagine. And it's, to me, looking like good chalk, kind of like the way the Chargers, at least the Chargers run game, and the Dolphins was mostly good chalk last week.
Yes. So this is definitely the game to load up on. And I don't think that it falls apart. We've got two big additions likely coming back on the Kansas City side with Chris Jones and Travis Kelce. I mean, how discouraged were you by what we saw with the receiver personnel in Kansas City? Like, is that almost hubris to be running those guys out there?
I think it's hubris to have Justin Watson on the field. I think,
but he played the best of them.
I get it, but that's more because the defense doesn't cover a guy like him. And I think, the Sky Moore drop, it was like, such a weird circumstance. And he normally doesn't drop passes is the thing. So I don't really share the Sky Moore panic. I don't think he sucks. I think it was one game where the Chiefs were clearly out of their element and had no rhythm of any sort. It's like they went into the game practicing with Kelce being the game plan all week, and then got to Sunday and were like, well, what else can we do? Or sorry, Thursday. And it's like, I don't know. I think that Moore comes back. Tony won't drop that many passes usually. It's not, his.
He might not get the opportunity to. I don't know.
No, they got to polish that turd. Brett Veach needs them to keep polishing, and they got to keep, like, that's why I get so pissed off when teams do this thing where they're yanking young players playing time around and like, oh, he's not ready. But when a GM puts their thumb on the scale, it's like, you got to put this guy on the field no matter what. Teams do it, and it's like, you want to tell me Kadarius Toney is like practicing well? Is he practicing at all? We don't really. He doesn't know how to run a slant. What has he been doing all this time? And you're saying
Well, he doesn't have
he's
the
ready?
right shoes on.
Yeah, so they lost because they had to polish that turd in addition to saving money on Chris Jones. And, you didn't save money and you lost against a weak team at home. So it's Brett Veach needs them to make him look good. And Tony will not get cast out for this. He'll need to, like send a threat in someone's DMs for saying that he sucks on Twitter or whatever.
Did he delete his account after?
Oh yeah, I guess he did. Normally he stays up all night just telling people to kill themselves or whatever, and it's So now he's getting serious.
Yeah, he's locking in 0 dark 30 like LeBron James does during the playoffs, and then on the other side, I think there seemed to be some consternation from people about Christian Kirk's role, and I would like your steadying thoughts on that, because that was interesting. I thought that the market basically had the Jaguars pecking order correct, where Ridley clear and above, best option, and that's looking good so far, knock on wood. But Kirk, I thought was I didn't get a ton of him, but I thought he was a fine, like, 5th round pick. And I thought Zay Jones was a fine, once you get to that part of the draft and the receiver pool really dries up, I always did like getting a Zay Jones type. But I was surprised to see him, be as much more involved than Kirk as he was. So do you think that changes it all? Or do you think that the Jaguars, by virtue of how last week went, it's like, let's go back to it?
I think some of Zay Jones being out there was for snaps where nothing was up for grabs at the receiver position. Like, if they're running, not that I'm saying this play happened, but if they're running a one wide look where they're for sure running the ball and they have 3 tight ends on the field, that might be Zay Jones that's out there. Like, Zay Jones played more snaps than Calvin Ridley in this game. So I think it's a few things. Like, they didn't run that many plays in general, and they kind of, especially in the second half, took their foot off the gas. So normally the more 3 wide they run, the more for sure Kirk is getting on the field. And I think even if they had been throwing more than they were, you would have seen Kirk on the field more. Like, if Lawrence in this game gets to 35 pass attempts, I'll be pretty surprised if Kirk doesn't have 7 targets. The other thing is, this might have been like a Press Taylor idea, and I'm sorry, this is actually one time where a GM should lean in and tell the coach how to do their job. Balky is not going to really be cool with them putting Zay Jones on the field and Kirk on the bench, even though he signed Zay Jones too. Like, Christian Kirk is what he spent a lot more money on, and he doesn't want to look foolish by having his expensive player basically benched for one who is cheaper and is clearly not as good. I mean, that's the other thing with Zay Jones. Like, he's not as good as Kirk. So if they want to keep doing that, if they want to do it in a situation where there's actual stakes, they will pay for it, and I doubt do it again. So with that said, I'm not that heavy on Kirk this year. It's not because I expected last week to look like that. It's just that I don't know. I was taking somebody else in that range, and obviously I'm pretty overweight on Ridley.
Yeah. So this is the Ridley cast. Quick question here. This is an interesting one. So this person could basically trade the 2 hot waiver wire pickups in Puka Nacua and Josh Kelly and get Chris Godwin and Jerick McKinnon in return in half-point PPR.
I think you got to think of this as Puka and Kelly for Godwin. I guess right. The disclaimer there is I'm such a McKinnon hater, but True. I really think McKinnon is not very good. So, but if you do think McKinnon's good, then that actually makes it pretty easy for me. I would prefer the Godwin side, and I think I prefer the Godwin side anyway. The other disclaimer being that I think Josh Kelly clearly cannot play, and I think that it was just the Dolphins cut him loose last week.
Yeah, that I think. That's going to be one that we look back on as week 1 waiver wire picks. Next year, looking back on this year and be like, remember when I spent like a quarter of my fab on Josh Kelly for some reason?
Remember when I thought that guy who averaged like 3.38 yards per carry over 250 carries was good because he had 10 good carries on like draw plays against the Dolphins?
Yeah, exactly.
You got to remember the sample size.
And this person, for the record, that has Puka Nacua also has Cup. I almost feel like you should hang on to, or I don't know. Is it a better to have
I
the
prefer
Rams
Godwin
insurance
over.
policy?
I prefer
Mhm.
Godwin over Nakua pretty easily, but I don't know. I guess if there's something to consider here, I would say no. I would normally say like maybe get greedy and keep the guy for another week, but I'm not convinced Nakua is going to be better than Godwin for that week. So
He won't be
it's
as
tough.
hot.
I don't know.
Yeah,
I don't know.
it's.
I got to recuse myself. I guess I'm just too biased on two of the players that I can't be impartial or whatever.
I think generally you want to be getting the best player in the trade, and that's the side that would be getting Godwin. So that's where I lean with it, and I think that there is a very small likelihood that both Nakua and Kelly end up being worth it to the point where the person that gave up Godwin is happy
Godwin
with
should catch
that.
100 passes pretty easily if he plays 14 games.
Well, speaking of Chris Godwin, we got the Bears and the Bucks down in Tampa. Bucks 2.5 point favorites. Bucks, I think a surprise last week on the positive ledger. Maybe they aren't quite as in tank mode as people such as myself expected. Although I did like them to cover, for the record, last
Oh
week.
yeah.
But that was more about the Vikings. But still, we have a Bears team that fell totally flat on his face. You bring in DJ Moore, you do nothing with him. There seems to be a point that their front office has made where they're out of polish for the turd as far as Chase Claypool goes, with him rumored to be inactive, a healthy scratch for this coming game. I mean, I have a
They
hard
only
time staying away
traded
from
Joey
Tampa on
Porter
this one.
Jr. for him.
Yeah,
Yeah.
should be fine.
Yeah, I think as much as I am kind of glad to see polls look silly, and I think the Bears are. I am not an Eberflus believer. Before I was agnostic, I thought he did a good job calling the Colts defense, but I didn't know how to make an opinion on Eberflus the last 2 years. This one game settled it for me, and his comments after the game about like I don't know, I don't everything about the offense. It would be like implied it's the offense's fault, and then they'd be like, well, coach, why'd that happen? He'd be like, you're gonna have to talk to someone else. Okay,
Yeah.
so whatever, you're done. With that said, the Buccaneers are probably or at risk of being without 3 of their better defenders. And John, how did we miss this Christian Izzian guy from Rutgers? Like, he was a 4-year starter who put up numbers and he had totally good testing. I had no idea who he was. He didn't seem to be at the combine, or at least didn't work out there, and then went undrafted. I heard his name for the first time in that broadcast, and
Yep.
I thought I knew about all these guys. Anyway, he's got a concussion. Carlton Davis has some toe thing that kept him out of practice Wednesday. Kalijah Cansey left the game with a calf thing. He didn't practice Wednesday. So if those 3 guys are out, those are starter reps. Their top corner, their third corner, and whatever you're thinking of their DL. It's like Cansey was way up there. So the Bears offense has no good reason to not bounce back here, especially if those guys are out. But even if they're not going to be 100%. So you got to do better. And it would be difficult for the Bears to call a game plan as incredibly stupid as they did last week. Plus, I think it's in the nature of Todd Bowles to kind of go aggressive on defense. And certainly guys like Carlton Davis, even if he's out there, he always wants to play press man coverage. And you don't want to do that against Fields, in my opinion. You want to sit back. The Fields problem, the problem that he has, which I don't consider like a fatal flaw. I think it's more of a problem when you have an incompetent team managing him. He's got a hitch in his processing where he either doesn't see things or chooses to wait longer than he should to see something as clearer than it can actually get. And in the time in between, he misses things. But when you run man coverage against him, you let him see where everybody is a little more easily. And especially you turn his back to him when you run for downfield coverage, and then he runs for 150 yards on you. So if they run that man coverage, they're begging for Fields to run wild on them, even if the Bears passing game continues to struggle.
Yeah. So it will be interesting to see, that Bowles angle that you brought up, whether he can go kind of against his nature and make Fields sit back and make the reads, because like you said, and this dates back to 2021 in the pre-draft process. The there's something about Fields' game where he's not like getting to his progressions quite fast enough, like you outlined there, and it's still here in 2023. So we'll see if the Buccaneers take advantage of that or not. I personally think that I will, just in the off chance, probably enter a DFS lineup that has Fields, but I'm not touching anything else from this offense until I see otherwise, although maybe DJ Moore will be cheap enough to where
I think Moore is a candidate to do a little something here.
I think so too. And someone in the chat actually brought up earlier, citing the Carolina days, that DJ Moore owns Tampa Bay, at least according to this commenter. Could be right.
I didn't know that off the top of my head, but historically, I guess given where he played, that would be, a chance. There's something there.
Makes sense. And he's quite good. All right. Finishing out the 1 o'clock window, we've got Chargers, Titans. Titans 3-point dogs at home. Chargers, still the Chargers.
Yeah, nice work, Staley. Got that calculator. It's going to pay off one of these times, but not yet. And I don't know, man. It's like the Chargers have so much advantage in this game matchup wise, but do you really want to pick Soy Boy over the bloody caveman Mike Vrabel? Like,
yeah, Vrabel could, like, if he was clean shaven when he woke up this morning, he would have this mustache by lunch.
Yeah, he wakes up with like animal fur scattered around his face, and blood all over it, and he goes to work, he washes it off and goes to work, and runs it 45 times against coaches like Staley, and that's just his life. So Staley again he didn't get anything to show for it, but he's still not prioritizing the run defense. That I guess he can't. I guess he'd be admitting like he was always a fraud if he ever tries to defend the run, and yet he doesn't have a pass defense to show for it. It's great. Even with Khalil Mack and Joey Bosa going against some left tackle I've never heard of, they didn't touch Tua Tagovailoa in the first half, and he threw like 23 passes or something. That's what exactly do you do around here, Staley? Like,
I don't know. So I'm so far out on him. Yeah, we need to call in the Bobs. We need to have a discussion. We need to send Staley to the basement and not let him bring his stapler with him.
I guess I got to take Chargers though, because Herbert is, he's going to bounce back, and the Tennessee defense kind of forces you to throw the ball. So that's another reason why Kelly's not going to do anything this week, in my opinion.
Yeah, I'm out on Kelly this week. Even if I guess I don't have him, so I don't really have to make this call. But I would use him in the flex if Eckler's out. But I would have to have some pretty kind of dire flex options, I guess, for that to really cross my mind. I'm going to stick with the Titans here. I wish I could get this at 3.5 just to insulate that field goal type of loss, but I feel like the Titans, drag this one into the mud as they are wont to do, and I think the Chargers have a hard time getting around it. So I think it's going to be a slog.
I'd love to see it.
The Chargers, regardless. Yeah,
I'm picking the Chargers, but I hope I'm wrong.
Okay, I hope you're wrong too, but that's because I have the Titans. Let's go Giants Cards. Giants 5.5-point favorites on the road after getting beaten 40-0. By the Dallas Cowboys on Sunday night. And the Cardinals, they made the Washington Survivor folks sweat for a little bit, yes. But that's about all I can say about that.
I guess their defense must have done okay, but man, that offense is even worse and dumber than I expected. The Cardinals, I mean. Yeah, they gave Zach Ertz 10 targets that he turned into 6 catches for 21 yards. That's actually why they lost. If they had put Trey McBride on the field for those targets, they would have won. And so Washington's pretty lucky that John Gannon's a really dumb guy who can't tell that his tight end is running a 5.5 40 and prefers him to the guy who runs a 4.5 40. And we'll see how good Gannon is at missing the point. I bet he could be pretty good at it. But as long as they keep putting Ertz out there, I mean. And Dobbs, my God, that's the first 9 versus 11 offense I've ever seen where it's a 0 at quarterback too. So it's a stupid team. They suck, and the Giants are going to clobber them.
I think the Giants are going to crush them too. I don't. They have like a couple injuries of note. Andrew Thomas is banged up. I
Oh,
know Darren.
that's bad. Yeah. Huh.
That,
Well, I
so
still
the
think the Giants killed him. Yeah.
yeah, the Cardinals are they're awful. They rightfully so. Like even if they showed some pluckiness in week one, it's like, well, you kind of expect them to. They've had all off season to get ready for that game, but now we're off. We're going down the river here, and I think that the Cardinals their canoe like doesn't really have a bottom, and they'll be at the among the silt here soon enough. So I don't know. Had to pull that metaphor out of the fire. So just using the word silt. Let's continue on. Well, I guess, would you start Daniel Jones in this spot?
Well, then I'd have to have drafted Daniel Jones, wouldn't I have? But if I do for some reason have him, and I don't have a better quarterback, this should be a fine Daniel Jones game. And as much as he is terrible, and as much as the Giants deserve to go 0-17 for the contract they gave him, they won't. And he's not as bad as he was in that game. I mean, Dable will never get worked quite that badly ever again, and Jones won't either.
No, I don't think so. There was something like cosmically off at MetLife Stadium.
Dan
Quinn
had he had Brian Dable in the sharpshooter. It was bad.
Just absolutely punishing old school bully tactics, the noogies, the wet willies, the shoving him into a locker, all the above applied last Sunday night from Dan Quinn wearing his cool backwards hat. Let's go Niners. Rams, Niners, 7.5 point favorites at PointsBet, 8.5 at BetMGM. So some split action there. I felt so stupid during that Niners game last week. I was like, Tomlin, home dog. It's like Niners are a wagon. They are.
We did not anticipate the Steelers having like the worst defense. They from the first snap they had no anything really, and the corners in particular were completely worked. Shanahan had it completely won by the first drive, and Brock Purdy continues to get to play on rookie mode. He, as always, I mean, he had like 3 good plays, I would say. The one getting out of the pocket and going to the left to get Deebo Samuel, that to me was a better play than the touchdown pass, the second touchdown pass to Ayuk. The first touchdown pass to Ayuk he was just wide open. It was like playing, it was like they were doing a walkthrough rather than playing real defense in an NFL game. And then the second one he threw to Ayuk, that's an interception if Patrick Peterson isn't awful. That's not actually a good throw to throw most of the time. So he wants to keep making that throw. The results won't be the same. And then what do you know? Like any other time he gets a little bit of heat, he just sucks again. And the key is he doesn't get any heat for 80% of his snaps. And so he looks really, I mean, I don't think he looks good, but he's playing on rookie mode. So everything's easy. And if it just stays that way, they never pay for the fact that he can't play in conditions that every other quarterback has to play in. So the Steelers being the worst defense ever, especially in that first half, certainly helped with that. I don't know what to make of the Rams defense. I mean, I know they got the better of the Seahawks, but when the Seahawks were as bad as they were in that game, it's kind of hard to give I should give the defense some credit, but it's like they just saw one of the worst offenses ever is another possibility. So
yeah,
maybe
the NFC West is just this weird, and I'm basically excluding the Cardinals from this discussion. They're not a real team, but there's like this weird flow chart that I think we need to draw up where it's like McVay owns Pete Carroll,
but Shanahan
owns McVay. So, and I don't know who Pete Carroll has a particularly like strong record against, but regardless,
I don't know.
Yeah, it'd probably have to be. But point being, the Niners historically have just kind of crushed the Rams under Shanahan, and I'm expecting more of the same this week.
Yeah, I will say they got to keep Purdy on easy mode again. They should kind of be able to do that, but if they can't, then most bets are off. But one thing I feel comfortable saying is the Rams offense is going to fall back down to earth in this one. Stafford was on fire against the Seahawks and he was just chopping them up. But instead of ineffective zones, the 49ers are going to be, a very aggressive in your face kind of defense. And Stafford's still the real deal, but I don't think him and his ragtag receiver crew are going to do so well here.
Well, that's a relief that Stafford still has it at least a little bit,
Yeah.
as long as he stays upright, which could be a challenge in this game, of course. But two important fantasy angles that we would be remiss if we didn't touch on. Like what you spend 30% of your fab on Nakua. You start him this week.
If you did, I don't know how you don't follow through.
You got to polish the turd. Be the team.
Well,
you...
Be the T. You were watching The Last Man on Earth recently or something? Sorry. That's what Will Forte does. That he's like, you do the crime, you do the time, do the C, do the T. Yeah. So it was a similar syntax, is why I was wondering. But yeah. So Nakua, not a turd, doesn't need turd polishing. Everyone could use a little polish, John, but there's a difference between standard polish and a turd specific one, and he doesn't need that. But man, yeah, you got to start him because you paid that much, and if he can regress quite a bit from week one's numbers, 15 targets and 60 snaps. If he gets 8 targets in the next 60, that's still a pretty good rate. And even if he's averaging 5 yards a target, that's still 40 yards or something, and probably on 4 or 5 catches. So in PPR, even in this matchup, I think Nakua is getting you at least like 8 points or something.
I think everyone agrees that these Rams receivers will regress. That last week will likely be an outlier, but I'm more worried, I would say, about Tutu Atwell sustaining than I am about Nakua. So
at least I think got Atwell at least can do the thing where the defense like loses him in a zone down the seam kind of thing. Mm-hmm. Whereas Nakua is going to find the sledding tough against the 49ers because they're going to crash down and tackle after the catch. But you're right, as far as base functions, it's harder to see how Atwell is there for the average play that they are likely to run.
Right. So Nakua top of that particular power rankings for now until Kupp gets back, and then what do we do with that backfield?
Man. How about this for a long shot prediction, John? I'll say the Ravens trade a conditional 7th or 6th for Cam Akers in the next week.
Please, God. So in that case, definitely hang on to Cam. Definitely hang on to Cam.
And I
Cam
guess
Akers.
Hold on to Kyron Williams, but don't expect more numbers. Just kind of be sad about the world, I guess.
Yeah, I think that's when it comes to the Rams, that fits the mood nicely. Speaking of sad moods, got the Jets going down to Dallas to face the Cowboys. The Cowboys, of course, again coming off that 40-point shutout victory over the Giants, and the Jets. Well, their dreams were dashed on national television. Not even a full drive into Aaron Rodgers, debuts. Which I
went downstairs. I went downstairs, so I was watching it upstairs. I went downstairs to get like a sparkling water, I assume, and came back up, and it's just like he's dead. What the hell happened? What the hell happened?
Yes,
he kind of slipped a little.
I was on the radio with Waylon and Jeff on XM on Monday night, and they have the tough task of hosting an entire radio show during a live NFL game. And I'm sort of like trailing off in my analysis about whatever they were asking me about, because I just see Rodgers like just writhing around on the ground and then getting hauled out of the medical tent. And I'm like, guys, I feel like Aaron Rodgers this might be it for him.
Dude, don't look, if you haven't seen it, don't look up the replay of it. It's disgusting.
Not a fan of watching Achilles tears.
Yeah, I had never seen one before that. Before like these doctors were like, you can tell it's reverberating, and I'm like, what does that mean? I'm like, ugh.
Yeah, the tendon is just shooting up. Really
anyway, that all sucks, and it's a bummer. I don't like Rodgers, but it's a bummer if only for the guy like Garrett Wilson. He was understandably very upset about it. So it's frustrating, and now the Jets have a turd to polish, John. Puka Nakua, he's no such thing, but Zach Wilson, we got that polish back out. We're going crazy on it, and we're hoping that something cool is the end product, and I really doubt it is. He looked so bad in that game. He can't do anything, man. He can't drop back, can't do anything. So Dan Quinn versus Zach Wilson. I don't know. What do you think?
I see pain coming Zach Wilson's way. It's funny, you mentioned Wilson's play last week, and going back to earlier in the pod, like he has the same mentality as Josh Allen with only like 70% of the tools. So like whereas Allen can get away with some of those crazy throws over the middle, like Wilson, that one pick over the middle, you're just like, what did you think was going to happen?
Wilson is not thinking. He is terrified. He doesn't want to play. You could see it on his face. He was miserable, and not because it was like it had gone badly and he was miserable as a result. He was like, I can't play. I can't do this. I don't want to be here right now. And it's just not going to get better for him. I don't know what to say. Like he's got the yips in addition to being a subpar talent. You don't get back from that, in my opinion.
Nope, that's going to be a tricky one to navigate, especially with Micah Parsons.
At least Breece Hall looked awesome. I mean, he looked, knock on wood, he looked like himself. So hopefully that remains the case. And certainly he's the only way, outside of Garrett Wilson heroics, it's the only way that they're going to put up any points on this one.
And actually, speaking of that Jets backfield, we had a question earlier in the pod where a person got offered Alvin Kamara for Dalvin Cook.
Yeah.
I think I would take that.
Do it.
Yeah. I think that there's probably like an increased expectation that the Jets are going to be a lot more run heavy. And I think that's probably well founded, but I think defenses know that too. So it's going to be a lot more clogged boxes and things like that. And Dalvin Cook, the longer that Breece Hall continues to ramp up, the more this is going to be Dalvin Cook is just spelling him.
And Alvin Kamara is going to kind of go nuts, in my opinion.
Yes.
With those receivers, you can't crash down on Kamara. You can't do it.
No, you can't. And he's going to be coming in fresh. Yeah, I take the Kamara side with that and just stomach the 2 empty weeks upcoming. Let's go Commanders, Broncos. Then we got a couple primetime games to close it out. We've got the Broncos, 3.5-point favorites against the Commanders. What are you looking for here?
Well, early season mile high did not help the Broncos against the stupid Raiders, but maybe Washington's even dumber, even worse than the Raiders, and maybe the spread ends up being right for that reason. But the Broncos are the same, except worse. Their defense is worse now. So what do we think then exactly? It's like we got the Hackett offense more or less because it's the Russell Wilson offense. Russell Wilson is an awful quarterback at this point. I don't know what happened. Maybe there's some kind of accommodation to be done. Sean Payton does not appear to be any closer to it. It was the exact same way they started last year, just checking down to the tight ends over and over, spamming the tight ends, checking down, and occasionally throwing like a desperation deep ball. But Russell Wilson, as far as how he ever played in Seattle, like that's not happening again. And what you're left with is bleak. It's like difficult to have the perspective of how bad Russell Wilson is now because we're still being biased by his past, but there's no correction to occur here in a positive sense. So if Washington does blow it, I think it's because Sam Howell gave up 6 sacks and gave them a couple turnovers for short fields, and they win the Broncos win like 17-10 or something, it has to be some kind of ugly way that they win. And I don't know what to make of the Washington side. I mean, I thought they were ugly in week 1. I was not encouraged by the amount of hits that Howell was taking. I didn't get to watch it, but he kind of invited that problem a lot at North Carolina. So, bad offensive line maybe, but he seems to be making things worse. And I don't know. It's traveling to Mile High. I worry about Washington keeping it together, but I still have to pick Washington. I just can't pick Russell Wilson right now. He's so bad.
He's so bad. And then my biggest axe to grind, maybe from the entirety of last weekend, is
Brandon Johnson.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Go back to
so
Knoxville,
stupid.
you clown. Ugh.
It's so dumb. It's so dumb. But yeah, that's another one too. Is like Peyton being like, oh, well, Mims isn't ready. It's like, well, then your team isn't. Throw in the towel and just let Mims play anyway. If Mims isn't ready, you have no receivers other than Sutton. And if that's the case, why even bother running a 2-wide set? Find some fullbacks, anything. This putting a player like Johnson on the field is so negligent, and yet it's that kind of thing that we just kind of have to accept from coaches. It's just, oh, well, they know more. Sometimes they don't. Sometimes they know less.
Like I know we bag on like some of these recent Tennessee receivers, but like I'm taking Juwan Jennings and Joshua Palmer like a million times out of a million over Brandon Johnson.
You're kind of stressing me a little on the Josh Palmer one. I agree he's probably better. I'm just not quite ready to make the leap because Josh
I'm not
Palmer
going
is
to
like wide receiver 85. Yeah.
just bleh. And for the record, I'm on Washington to cover this one. I wouldn't be totally shocked if they won. Patriots Dolphins 3-point favorites on the road in Foxborough. Dolphins kind of the darlings of the NFL. Like I'd say, if the Lions are on the NFC side, I thought the Miami did a lot of good PR last weekend with what they did and how exciting that was. I mean, Tua's MVP odds jumped to where he's tied with Mahomes for to be the favorite. I think his odds for like being the passing yardage leader are, there was a crazy change there as well. So
that's so weird that changes that much on one game. Like, don't we expect Tyreek Hill to do that stuff?
Right, and I think
Tua
also
did great. I didn't mean to take away credit from him. He did great, but it's just like I thought they would do stuff like that anyway.
Yeah, like as long as Tua was upright, that what reason would we have to think that this wouldn't be an insanely explosive offense? I mean, that's why Tyreek Hill was a top 5 fantasy pick. That's why Jalen Waddle was a top 20 fantasy pick. I mean, like, what did you think?
But good for them. I mean, yeah, this is what they do. So Mark Daniels of Mass Live was tweeting out that in 6 games, Tyreek Hill, this is going back to the Chiefs too, of course, but in 6 games against the Patriots, Hill has caught 7 of 16 targets for 88 yards when matched up against Jonathan Jones of the Patriots. And so I guess we have to expect Jones to see as close to a shadow assignment here as possible. You certainly don't want Christian Gonzalez, good as he is, against a receiver like Hill, not just because of how good Hill is, but the type of receiver that Hill is the type of corner that Jonathan Jones is. And so Jonathan Jones, bizarrely, he might not even be like a top 10 corner. He might be. He's quite good, but he might not be a top 10 corner, and yet he appears to be the best corner for matching up against Tyreek Hill.
So is it like the Marshawn Lattimore, Mike Evans duels of old?
Well, it's just I think it's just because they're both short and so fast. It's like if you're trying to cover Tyreek Hill, even if you're fast, if you're Tariq Woolen, you can't cover Tyreek Hill even though you're about as fast as him because you're 6'4" and you're stumbling trying to start with him. But when you're 5'9", like Jonathan Jones, you can do it a little bit better. So there's reason to think this is a tough matchup for Hill. I happen to think that those numbers, even though they're a testament to how good Jones is, he is very good. They're also numbers that are clearly begging for correction. You're not going to hold Tyreek Hill to a 7 out of 16 catch rate. That's whatever the number goes to. It's up after that. You're not keeping it at that rate. So Tyreek Hill should do something a little more modest, but still better than he does against Jonathan Jones. Usually, like, I don't know, five catches for 80 yards and a touchdown, maybe on like 9 or 10 targets. I don't know, some bad case scenario like that. But if that does happen, then it should be a Waddle game. And I hate the idea of having to figure out how to do it, but since it's Mike McDaniel's problem and not mine, I can imagine Jalen Waddle getting open a little bit in this one.
I think so too. So I think that he ends up putting up solid production here, and the lid will be on this Miami offense a little bit more going up against this Patriots defense on the road. And of note, 2 big uniform things to remember for this weekend. Falcons wearing the red helmets with the old school bird. So bear that in mind. Patriots wearing the gorgeous white lids, red jerseys. Remember that
Irving Fryer era Pats. Yeah.
You know my feelings on the Patriots, but I gotta say that might be my favorite uniform in football, the old Patriots one.
I remember that I would always get kind of like bus sick seeing that uniform. It just reminded me of just I don't know what exactly. I get like a little like motion sickness out of it. It's just so so gross looking to me, but if you like that stuff, that's cool too. I do believe in the power of like relics and stuff though, so they might kind of channel the greatness of like Willie McGinnis and Bruce Armstrong and Irving Fryer and all those guys, and of
Ted
course
Washington.
Oh yeah, and I was gonna say, of course, Scott Zolak also.
Well, duh. Let's see what anything and Tony.
I'll take the Dolphins to win, but I don't really like to pick this one because I don't know. Patriots and Foxborough can be a little weird. And Mac Jones did a good job last week. He was really close to kind of losing his grip forever early in that game. It was such a disaster the way the game started. I've been a Mac critic, but I don't know how you're not impressed. Not you, John. I don't know how a given person would not be impressed with what Mac Jones did there.
I will say my best ball portfolios. Thank you. You were touting him as a good 18th round pick. Correct.
At least that's where we win, John.
This is how I win. All right, Monday night doubleheader, and for the record, I like the Patriots to cover here, and I guess I like them to win if it's just 3 points. I figure that should work out, but could certainly be wrong, and Tyreek Hill could be just doing this in my face. Let's go Saints Panthers.
Panthers suck.
They are very bad, so I'm on the Saints here. Loved Rashid Shaheed's returns last week. I think that he might be legitimately here to stay.
He's really cool. Yeah, he's good.
Big fan. Olave doing Olave things. We expect that again. And it seemed like one of the big things that Carolina couldn't afford much on the injury front, but J.C. Horn having the freak injury, as Frank Reich alluded or described it as.
Yeah, that sucks.
That's I think the Saints and, Derek Carr didn't even look great, still threw for 300 yards last week. I think that, we're looking at more of the same. I feel like the Panthers are a totally rudderless ship in their own right. And if we're as big of Bryce Young skeptics as we have been, week one feels like a good starting point to that. And I don't really see it getting better in this spot, even with it being at home.
Yeah, I'm definitely a skeptic of Bryce Young's, but even I didn't really see it going that badly in week one, certainly not against the Falcons of all teams. So it's bad enough. It looked bad enough that I think we have to worry that the Carolina coaches also have no idea what they're doing. And I'm certainly open to that. I think Frank Reich showed himself for a fraud in Indianapolis and a scoundrel as well. The way he threw his offensive coordinator under the bus just to still get fired by Irsay like 5 days later for losing the next game. That's pitiful. That's weakling stuff. And if Bryce Young has to deal with a weakling coach in addition to everything else, then it's kind of, I'm not really willing to judge him too much yet, but all the same, what's going to get better exactly? The matchup isn't getting better. The matchup's getting worse. So tough spot for Bryce. Not fair what he's having to deal with.
So, I was saying last week that this could be like the greatest week in history for Duke football with Noah Gray, like suddenly being on the fantasy radar and them having just beaten Clemson. Bryce Young sputtering out of the gate and Alabama losing to Texas. Tough time to be a Tide fan. And my thoughts and prayers go out to you.
How is the spread 2.5 and 3? What am I missing here? Like this is one of those where I'm always wrong, but how the hell are the Saints not going to win by like 25 points?
Yeah, that's what I'm thinking, and that's what obviously scares you off of it. Yeah. But I'm still going to use the Saints as my pick in this one. I think the Panthers are a tough watch this season, and having them on national television like this is it's unfortunate. Let's finish up. Browns-Steelers. Browns 2-point favorites in this one on the road. Browns impressive, obviously, kind of steamrolled the Bengals last week, and the Steelers were steamrolled by the 49ers. So by extension, is this a double steamroll, or do the two steamrollings cancel each other out?
Well, Tomlin teams don't quit over the course of a year, and I don't think they quit against the 49ers either, but they were definitely shell-shocked, had no answers whatsoever. Patrick Peterson, let's just pull the plug on this already. That was ridiculous. He sucks. It's not his fault, but it's kind of embarrassing how he has no awareness of it all. Like, he thinks he's still awesome, and it's like, man, if you're going to talk like that, don't give up that Ayuk touchdown. have some awareness. I don't know, a little bit anyway. Anyway, the Browns, I think, look pretty tough. And if the Schwartz defense is making those corners, especially the corner returns under Joe Woods were so bad, especially given that he was a defensive backs coach initially. I don't know how they got such bad returns out of Ward, Newsome, and this Emerson appears pretty good. So looks like Schwartz is more like cutting those corners loose in the sense of letting them play like aggressive man coverage and stuff. And that frees up more to blitz and everything like that. And Myles Garrett, of course, looking menacing right now. Kenny Pickett looking like he's not even the CFL quarterback that I thought he was. He's making me worry that he's not even the slot receiver project that I recently thought that he was. He has nothing. The Steelers, they have to run the ball and they have to stick with it and get something going because they're not going to throw the ball.
Right. So with that in mind, I remember kind of a recurring theme from last year was we like running backs against the Browns. How does that change now with the defensive upgrade in Cleveland?
Yeah, I don't know. The personnel was not very good against the run, to be fair to Joe Woods, but I do happen to think at this point that he kind of just made everything worse than it needed to be. So Schwartz was never known, I don't think Schwartz was ever known for being a good run defensive coordinator. If anything, I thought that was like a trade-off of his because he always did that wide 9 alignment that would leave contain and the interior run defense a little weak. But they got better results last week. And the personnel has improved too. They got more at defensive tackle than they did in the past. So, they got that 2-gap guy from Utah, or was that the Baylor guy? I can't remember. It was a Baylor guy. The Baylor guy who is huge. They got him at like his nose tackle now. That's good to see.
Not Sean Oakman, for the record.
Oh God, no, the nose tackle, like Aika or whatever. Anyway, he and a couple
Phil
other guys.
Taylor from Baylor. Just name some guys. I'm sorry.
Yeah, Danny Watkins.
Sorry to throw you off.
No, I love to remember some guys. Forgot about Phil Taylor, but I think the Browns just completely, not completely kill them because the Steelers are going to play tough, but Steelers are sinking, man. Pickett, he's not going to make it to October.
Strong words, but I expect nothing less. But yeah. All the more impressive to drop a take of that temperature after a lengthy.
It's Trubisky time. If he's still on the team, I don't even know who the backup is. Whoever it is, it's that time.
I think it's Mason Rudolph. He's not allowed to wear a face mask. He's not allowed to wear the face mask. He has to just have the helmet with none of the fixings on it, and we'll just see where it goes. I mean, and beautifully prime time against the Browns.
Yeah, I was going to say they can't bench Pickett for this game because Myles Garrett would murder Mason Rudolph. But after this game, I think it's Rudolph time, maybe.
Boy, I guess there was some chatter here in the comments section. Your thoughts on Calvin Austin given the Deontay Johnson injury? He's fun, but I'm not sure that you can budget more than like 5 or 6 targets to him, and a lot of them might be like bubble screen, like right at the line of scrimmage, and see if he can weave his way through traffic.
He was getting a lot of usage, but it was kind of desperate, like they were just they just didn't know what else to do. So I like Austin a little bit. I have no sense of how much he can do on plays that are more base function play. He had a lot of like design screens and stuff is what I mean. So as far as running organic routes, I don't know what he has. And moreover, Allen Robinson played over him last week.
Oh, that is a good point. Allen Robinson come back from the dead.
Did he? I guess he had 5 catches. Yeah, so that's pretty.
I know he led the Steelers in receiving yards, but I think that goes to show. If you asked anyone in Steelers Nation, you show them a box score, you say, "Hey, our guy Allen Robinson led us in receiving today." He's like, "Oh my God, was it a disaster?" Yes, it was.
Yeah, probably worse than you think too.
Yeah, somehow even worse than the score would suggest. I've been on the Steelers all week as a bounce back, but you raised some very legitimate concerns.
They'll bounce back a little. Like they're not going to look that bad 2 weeks in a row. Tomlin won't allow it, but their problem is they're at a major talent disadvantage here.
Yeah, and that should be able to be enough for Cleveland to carry this one.
No Hayward.
No Hayward. That's also pretty significant. They just can never get out of week one without like a devastating defensive injury. But that's going to do it for us here on the RotoWire Fantasy Football Podcast, the Week 2 breakdown edition. Huge thanks to our sponsors over at Rival Fantasy, over at Better Vision, and Vivid Seats, and of course our podcasting host, the Blue Wire Network. For Mario Puig, I'm John McKechnie. Thanks for listening.
Try RotoWire today, free for 10 days. Get our premium tools, rankings, analysis, and breaking news alerts. No credit card required. Go to rotowire.com/try.